Welcome to the Practicing Accountant Podcast, your go-to resource for transforming your accounting practice. This podcast is for accountants ready to take control of their business and build their ideal practice by mastering the essentials, setting the right prices, defining a powerful niche, and selling with ease. We'll dive into strategies that boost profits, attract your ideal clients, elevate your services, and help you choose the most effective pricing models. We are champions for efficiency, value, and intentionality, and adversaries of people-pleasing, bad clients, and complacency. We provide actionable strategies to help you break the hamster wheel of typical accounting work. The mission of the Practicing Accountant Podcast is simple: to enhance your experience as an entrepreneurial accountant and help you turn neglected practices into a thriving business. So, if you're ready to level up your practice, this podcast is for you. Tune in and let's get to work.
Doug, welcome back.
I've been here a little time. I didn't leave.
Oh, yeah.
You're the one who left.
I did leave.
Yeah, good reason though, right?
Had a new little girl.
New girl. And what's her first name?
Emery.
Emery.
Yep. It's a family name on the wife's side.
Okay. Like a parent or a grandparent or something?
Her uncle. It's her uncle's middle name and her grandpa's first name, but spelled way differently. So,
Both males.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it says Emery. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Nice. So no fancy like PHQRETP.
No. I had to push back a little bit on the Y's and I's and to make it more traditional, but yeah, nothing fancy.
That's awesome. And we're not even, I guess it'll be a week old tomorrow.
Week old tomorrow. Yeah. That's
Wow.
why we missed a week of the podcast.
We missed a week. That's the first week we missed since at least a holiday, probably. Well, I guess it wasn't that long ago. I guess it would have been Christmas, huh?
That's true.
Yeah. Not much has changed, I don't think, since we missed a week. I'm keeping an eye on things in public accounting, and for those solopreneurs or SOHOs, as we're kind of toying with calling them, the single owner home office accountant. But there's one thing I wanted to touch on today that, I picked it up in an article, and I was reading through the article. Just, it's a typical public accounting article talking about private equity and how it's changing everything. I think may have been a Wall Street Journal article. And there was a quote from someone in the article about, firms adopting a private equity mindset. And didn't really elaborate on what that meant. More assumed what that means, and the journalist that put it together didn't get curious about that either. But I did, and thought, what is that private equity mindset? Before I would kind of go into what it is, I think the biggest question is why you should be aware of the private equity mindset. And for me, the private equity mindset is basically a way to defend the independence of your firm. Should you choose. There's a lot of firms out there, big, small, in between, that are all resting somewhat comfortably with the idea that they are going to remain independent, and they will not get sucked up and into this private equity mishmash that's going on. And that's great. Good for them. It's wonderful that they want to remain independent and not be tempted by those private equity dollars or see those 10-time earnings payouts that some of the partners are getting out there, which sound pretty nice.
Yep.
But what is that like? How do you actually guarantee that you remain independent? Well, if you're going to compete against a bunch of companies that have more capital now, have more resources, have more or better systems or better alignment with a strategy or a goal, how do you compete with that? Well, I might say do the same thing, but without the private equity money.
Yep.
But the reason why it's important is that I think a lot of firms are going to be tempted by this, and if they truly want to remain independent, or more importantly, not be in a position where they have to get private equity infusions or money, adopting that kind of mindset before the money shows up is a great way to secure independence. But not only that, it makes you a much more attractive potential portfolio company for a private equity firm if you adopt this mindset early.
So what you're saying is the private equity mindset is acting like a private equity ran accounting firm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm starting to kind of line up with it being the only way to run a firm.
Which is growth minded, not people pleasing, a little bit more objective.
A lot more intentionality, which is,
Mm-hmm.
right up yours and my alley.
Yep.
But I'm toying with it. I'm not decided, and it's not an opinion yet. But I'm toying with the idea is that this is how firms should be behaving, regardless of whether they want to stay independent or not. This is the best way to survive in this industry right now is by adopting the same mindset that's introducing itself into the industry every day. You'll be able to compete better. You'll be able to adjust better. There's a lot of things coming down. If you think bookkeeping is not going away or the monthly close is not going to be done by AI, then I'm sorry you're listening to the wrong podcast. If you think that you won't be hitting a button to get things done versus doing it yourself, if you think that just growing 10% accidentally is going to give you security, if you think that not providing services outside of traditional compliance services is not a big deal, I got news for you. That's what everyone else is starting to do and is already on their way to doing, and maybe a lot more than you think.
Yep.
I think about the innovation curve, and I have to actually look it up here since we, are right next to our computers. But here we go. So the first 2.5% of people that adopt a new way, or let's just say a new accounting model, those innovators represent 2.5% of the entire population. The next group is the early adopters, where 13.5% of the population is starting to adopt the new methodology or the new accounting model. And then we get into the early majority, which is the next 34%, the late majority, which is another 34%. And then you get the laggards, which is the last 15%. These are the folks that hang on to the old school way of doing it up until the point that no one is sending them faxes again, and they finally decide to get rid of the machine, right?
I think the IRS are laggards, just saying.
IRS are laggards for sure. and God and thank you for that. I think there's a number of taxpayers out there that are very appreciative that the IRS is not on top of their game, because they're getting away with all kinds of things now. Mm-hmm. As soon as technology shows up and actually gets that data together and starts doing their own math, start figuring some stuff out.
Yeah.
And we each have a parent probably that had a phone that was a flip phone up until the point that the cracked screen, just you couldn't even see the numbers you were dialing anymore, and then finally got that first iPhone 2 or whatever it is they were comfortable jumping into. But I don't know where we're at on this curve right now as far as private equity and adopting that as being a potential model. But let's say we're in the somewhere between the first 2.5, the innovators, and the early adopters. I think that's where we're at. Can we say that 16% of all accounting firms have adopted the private equity model? That no. Some big ones have, but if you look by sheer number, not size, there is, tons and tons and tons of small shops and Sohos that aren't jumping into this private equity model yet. Which to me means there's still a great opportunity to be in that early adoption or the early majority in adopting the private equity mindset, so that you can be more competitive, you can have a better firm, you can do better, put more to the bottom line, be more strategic, grow better. All the stuff that you and I typically talk about is kind of embodied in this concept of the private equity mindset. So, Doug, you might be curious, what exactly is a private equity mindset? Well, I put together some of my own thoughts on this, and then I, of course, leverage some artificial intelligence to help me be a little bit more creative than maybe I otherwise would be. And I came up with, I think, 8 things that kind of distinguish a firm as having a private equity mindset. The first one I thought was great. The first one, I was kind of proud of myself for a few minutes, and then AI came up with the same thing, and then I was still kind of proud of myself. But
that means you're at least as smart as ChatGPT.
At least as smart as my future computer gods. And it's to have a client portfolio approach. So if you think about a private equity fund, they group their investments into different portfolios, and it might be grouped by industry or by risk, or it might be just location, geography. There's a lot of ways they might group their portfolios, but they're very intentional about their investments and how they are put out there into the world. And they're going to balance something that's got a lot of liquidity with something that's got a lot of risk, or something that's more of a long-term play. And so that way their investors are secure in their investment, and they're still getting a return, and they're still hoping for a large ROI at the back end, which is usually 3 to 5 years in a sale. But how many firms actually use that kind of an approach? And I'm not going to say that the ones that have private equity money in them now do this, but I thought it was just an interesting thought. Like if you had to group your clients into a portfolio or portfolios, what would that look like? And what does risk look like in your client portfolio? I've talked to a number of accountants recently. Well, I say number two. I've talked to 2 accountants recently that more than 40% of their business is tied up in a single client.
Oof.
And that's concentration risk.
Yeah.
And that's a tough spot to be in if something happens to that client. I talked to a coach actually recently who, probably like 80% of her business was tied up in government work. Well, as you can imagine from the headlines these days, it's not the time to be promoting, any sort of government contracts for training, especially around, say, DEI education.
Yep.
So, you got to watch that concentration risk, and you just watch the risk of having volatile clients. I've got another client that comes to mind that has maybe 15 clients that he works with, and he does more of a client advisory services model. And, 2 or 3 of them, maybe 4, are on the verge of bankruptcy. And, he's able to go out and get new business, so it's not a significant risk to him. But that's something that, this private equity approach, this client portfolio approach would be managing. Because otherwise we're just looking at clients one-on-one. We're just looking at line by line. Yeah, I like them. They pay on time. They don't treat me like shit. They get me their stuff. They don't surprise me. But taking more of this long-term, prioritizing clients based on what you want to have in your portfolio is very much like, yours and my conversations around niching.
Yep.
And, working with the clients that you really want to develop some expertise in, and the pricing power that comes with it.
And how many firms have never even assessed that that piece of their business? Like what types of clients do they have? They probably have no idea. They just have a client list.
Well, yeah, they could, if you ask them, you put them on the spot, and it'd say, well, I've got a diverse mix of, lots of things. And I got the garage down the street, and I take care of the grocery store down there. But actually to speak to it and say, well, I diversify between construction and real estate, because usually one of them is doing great. And then if the other one's not doing great, the other one's usually doing okay.
Yeah.
So like actually creating, some, almost like a derivative where, one business is doing well based on the market, the other one may be not, but because of how they both sit in the market, if one's doing great, the other one's not, it's always going to be one of them is doing great.
Right. Yep.
Moving on into the private equity mindset, another one is value creation from advisory services. So, the private equity firms, the first things they do when they invest money in these accounting firms is they come up with the alternative practice model, which means they split the compliance from the advisory services. So tax, account, or auditing go over here, and then anything that's CAS, whether you're talking about advisory or accounting, go over here.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to put a ton of money into the compliance side. They may try to get them more efficient. They're going to try to drain as much margin out of them as they can, reduce costs, do all the things private equity does, streamline management. But over here on the CAS version of the investment, they're going to be dumping money and pumping money into it and getting them to acquire other businesses that they could cross-sell. They're going to be, really trying to boost the opportunities there. And again, with your own firm, if you're just sitting here on this compliance side, private equity isn't too interested in you.
No.
And with the private equity mindset, with I want to remain independent mindset, having diversified services beyond just typical compliance is a real value add.
They may be very interested in you because they see the upside in all of this untapped revenue of a client list that you have.
Possibly.
They the compliance work is basically a loss leader in that business model where you're willing to take a hit on the compliance piece so that you can offer high level advisory packages to them. So they might be even more interested in that. I would be from an investment standpoint.
Good work. I mean, if you came in and, if you're a bigger firm and you bought a client or a firm that had a ton of just tax and audit or just tax clients with the opportunity to day one start selling additional service to them, that absolutely would be attractive.
Yep.
Investment in talent. That one the AI came up with. I didn't come up with that one because I wouldn't have put investment in talent underneath the private equity mindset, but AI did. The idea, in AI's mind was, just getting the right talent to drive that portfolio of clients into, better revenue, better growth, better opportunities, etc. But I'm still on that one because, from my experience with private equity, when they come and invest into a company, one of the first things they do is they change management.
Yeah.
So, you may have a different CFO or CEO or different leader, new managing partner. Now, with most of the public accounting firm investments,
they are the talent.
They are the talent. They haven't been dumping managing partners as far as, I'm aware, which doesn't mean it's not happening. So they're really sticking with the talent that's there. The investments they're making in them, the people that are there, I've heard two different sides of that story. Like in some cases, this is horrible, and now it's just a sweatshop. In other cases, now we get bagels in the breakfast room.
Yeah.
So just hit or miss. Scalability and efficiency. That's one that I absolutely believe that the private equity mindset needs to have, because you're trying to grow. You're trying to get more margin. You're trying to get bigger pieces of the market or the industry or the portfolio. You're really trying to be aggressive in expanding your reach and your touch, which I think is a great thing for any firm to be mindful of. But again, there are other firms which are I only want to work 15 hours a week and make 200 grand a year, and that's all I ever want to do, and that's fine. Good for you. But again, there is a AI monster coming your way, and whether you want to believe it's here or whether you want to tell yourself it's 2 years from now, I got news from you. It's here.
Yep.
Focus on profitability. I thought this was probably one of the more distinct things. Like in a small firm, are you focused on profitability? Sure, but you're not squeezing it. Like you're not, pouring over the financials on where you can get more margin out of your work. And I'm not talking about like making it a miserable experience for the people that work at the firm or for the individual that runs it, but having that mindset of let's be profitable, not necessarily to put more money in my bank account, but to put more money into the firm, to reinvest. Like a lot of Sohos are, whatever they take, whatever they make, they take. And I think the private equity model is much more of a whatever you make, you invest.
Yeah.
You reinvest into the firm. You're trying to grow it, expand it, make it scalable, and reach different markets.
And that becomes a question of lifestyle preference, of how much you want to grow your firm. Number 4 right before that was the scalability. And I think, the profitability and scalability can be contradictory a little bit. To focus on scalability and revenue growth for the Soho is not as important as the profitability, whereas the private equity model might focus more on scalability for more long-term growth and market share, basically, at that point.
Well, you think about that mindset, the private equity is just trying to compound the growth and the size of the organization so that when they do turn it in 3 to 5 years, they're going to make all their money back plus some, and then let someone else run with it and see what they can do from there.
Right.
So, the scalability and growth is a must-have, because if it's stagnant for private equity, they made a bad investment. But I think the same mindset exists or could exist for the Soho that, unless I'm doing the thing that I want to, do, either more profit, bigger, scalable, additional services, you're unfortunately going to find yourself in that laggard on the curve, and it might be too late.
Yep.
The next one's a good one, which is this one wasn't mine. Long-term value over short-term gains, and the idea there being that private equity is looking at an investment of 3 to 5 years. They're not as concerned with year 1 or 2, but when they get to year 3, they're expecting that a lot of things they put in motion back in year 1 are going to start bearing fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So, investments in merging or acquiring other firms, investments in technology, additional services, cross-selling more, better business development efforts by the crew, whatever it is. They're always thinking about the investment we make today and the benefit we get in the future. Versus your typical Soho, they're just trying to get through the season. And, they're saying yes and no based on the capacity here. Clients come in, they have a checkbook and they can write a check with it. And that's a good client for this year. They're not thinking about, does this fit my long-term strategy? Is this a client I'll want to keep next year, or I'm going to want to fire them? Am I pricing this at a level that I'm excited to charge and will be charging them again next year? But we tend to take more of a short-term people-pleasing approach than a long-term longevity-pleasing approach, I guess.
Yeah, that short-term gain mindset is what gets you into that hamster wheel that we talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Next one, and this goes back to, I think that having a private equity mindset is good regardless of whether you want to stay independent or not. And that is, it makes you attractive, and you have the option for merger or being bought or whatever you end up, interested in doing or not. But having this mindset before that money shows up is going to make you an easier acquisition if you so choose. And if you remain independent, it's going to make you tougher to beat in the market because you're doing the same thing they're already doing.
Yep.
And so you'll have just a better chance of survival. And it's a great strategy just to kind of future-proof your firm with some of the steps you take today.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one wasn't mine, but just risk management. This kind of goes back to the portfolio, but making decisions with a risk avoidance or tolerance perspective is something that private equity is doing all the time. Is this going to create value or not? Is this going to create a return in a few years or not? Is this something that my investors are going to be happy that I said yes to or not? And I think, again, those are questions that your typical Soho small firm isn't asking because they don't have to. They don't have an owner. They don't have someone that's a third party, outside party breathing down their neck, but that doesn't mean they can't.
Right.
So those are, I'll recap. So the client portfolio approach, creating value through advisory services, investing in talent, scalability and efficiency, focusing on profitability, long-term value over short-term gains, M&A strategy, and risk management being the 8 things that would help you adopt more of a private equity mindset.
And I don't even think that is a private equity exclusive mindset. I think that's simply a business owner versus a practitioner.
Which, and I think the distinction is, if you look at a normal company, a lot of these things they're doing.
Right.
And so you don't have to worry about the private equity piece, but because of public accounting being what it is and private equity showing up the way it is, to distinguish it, because you could, I think to your point, call this just a business mindset, right? Or just a ownership mindset, something we've talked about a lot. But in the case of the temperature of the industry right now,
sure. Yep.
the words just kind of stick a little bit more.
Yep. little scarier.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think, to take these and maybe kind of wrap up this conversation, I think there's opportunity here for our listeners just to consider their mindset as it is versus what a private equity mindset that they could adopt and is available to them would look like, and decide whether there's some things there that they could start doing and being more intentional about, which would help them future-proof their firm and give them a better leg up, and early adopt something that they may never adopt, but they'll be ready if they need to, and they'll be stronger for it. And so I guess if you bottom line this conversation is that we want the firms that we talk to and have a chance to interact with to be stronger, and practicing a private equity mindset without private equity is stronger.
Yep. Awesome, dude.
That's what I got. So thanks for watching this episode and our diatribe on this, and congratulations to Dan and the new babe.
Thank you
Emery.
very much.
And we'll be back on schedule again next week, and appreciate everyone watching.
Yep. See ya. Thanks, Doug.
Cheers.